Perfect. Looks good, Danielle.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, so I'll get started here now. So the title of my talk today is Laying the Foundations, How Accessibility Supports Assistive Technology Use. So while this is obviously an assistive technology event, it would be remiss of me not to mention some accessibility measures. So without these, some assistive technology won't work, or it may be more difficult for AT users to access. Last week, we actually we celebrated Global Accessibility Awareness Week, which is our Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is, my everyday these days. That's part of my role here in Ahead is making sure our digital content is accessible. So that's every day now. It led to a bunch of really, really good resources coming out from a lot of different sectors of society, like a lot of companies and industries kind of were releasing their own guidelines, which was great. So it's definitely definitely a good time for it all. So just a little quick outline of the session. It is going to be quite PowerPoint and talk heavy, but please do interrupt me. And what I'll do is I'll leave a lot of space for questions and queries at the end. I know a lot of people might have specific questions about, a specific issue they've encountered, so feel free to jump in with that. So in this session, we're going to talk about, well, what is accessibility? Why should we talk about it? And then we'll go through some basics and some examples, such as headings, images, links, and then a little bit of design. And then at the end, I'll show you some models that you can use for creating accessible content. So while we might not all be quote unquote content creators, I know that's the new cool name for YouTubers apparently and TikTokers is content creators. But it is also technically for, teachers and educational staff and lecturers and support staff. If you create any sort of document, even in your own workplace, then you are a content creator. So congratulations. Um, we're going to start here with what do we mean when we say accessibility? So I'm going to ask if you want to put a little bit in the chat there, what words spring to mind when the word accessibility comes up? Just put whatever comes straight to your mind, or what does accessibility mean to you? Accessibility is a term that's used for a number of different things. I mean, for example, a lot of people might use it specifically in the context of, making a product accessible to customers by reducing the price. It's literally more accessible for more people. So we can see some coming in the chat there. Universal design, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Equality, reasonable accommodations, these are all fab. Ease of access, Deltas can access, yeah, absolutely. Make easier to understand, access for all, yeah, for sure. There's definitely a theme coming in here. Diverse ways for people to access things, yeah. Equality again, yeah. Equity, yeah, for all people to access depending on their ability, yeah, perfect. So I think the same kind of vibe is coming in here, is that everyone's kind of getting at that key message, which is, allowing everyone to access things, and whether that be in, in a universal or easier kind of way, or in a more inclusive way. So in my work, I use the term accessibility in the context of this content can literally be accessed by disabled people, which is my remit. That will come with its own metrics and standards, its own metrics and standards, but you'll often find that some accessibility guides offer conflicting information. And this is, it might seem obvious, but it's because not all disabled people are the same. We're all different. We all have different needs. Some may have conflicting access needs, and that's okay. One major element of accessibility that a few people mentioned is ensuring that people have choice or autonomy in how they get their information, because one size never fits all. So that's just a little bit there now. What I'll do now then is I'll go into this again. So, Danielle, this is an assistive technology event. We get accessibility, cool, great. but why am I focusing on content and structure instead of like showing you a cool piece of software or hardware that you'd want to use? You know, as much as I'd love to be showing you some cool tech that I have, I'm a big tech enthusiast. There you'll be getting a lot of that from other presenters, and I think that getting the foundations right really allows us to build from there. So I have just a quick picture there, illustrative of kind of it's a kind of a newly designed building it looks like, and it's got these support pillars there. So what I mean by this is those kind of that support piece is really, really important, and that foundational piece is really, really important for getting AT right. So if you don't have accessible content, the best assistive technology in the world won't be able to properly use that or show that or convey that information. So you can have the most advanced, expensive, innovative new tech on the market, but if the content that you're trying to access isn't accessible, the tech isn't going to help much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just share a video, and excuse me, I'm just going to share my screen again. And I'll share this now. Let's double check that's loading. Perfect. So I'm going to share a video. Do let me know if you can't hear it. I'll also, if someone wants to paste the link in the description, that'd be great. It is a video from UCSF in the States, and it's to demonstrate how an inaccessible document or content will still be inaccessible even if you use a screen reader. So a lot of the times, maybe people who aren't familiar with it might say, you know, well, yes, if I give this student a piece of assistive technology to use, then that's fine. That's the end all. They can access it. But there's actually another section underneath that, which is the foundation. So, for example, I use the text-to-speech function on my phone quite a lot, particularly for reading longer pieces of text. But if my phone can't parse that text, or if there's an image of text, it'll just say image or image title or something. And what I hear is not much use to me. So I'm going to just play this video here now. And let me just turn on the captions.
This is Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department. Here today with a brief tour of screen reading technology. I'm a blind person who has been using
just double check, see if I can get
that. Screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation button. Link, University of California, San Francisco. Link, about UCSF. Link, search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rating percent, 75%, 70%, 65, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link, UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2, search for heading level 2. You are here. Heading level 1, make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it.
To describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table, 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications. Table.
So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the
Wealth
table,
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
and as I
Column
move
1 of 3.
across,
Approved. 1975. Column 2 of 3.
we're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
Table 3 columns.
second table on the page,
Medicine. Row 2 of 5. Tolbutamide.
and as I'm in the
Tolbutamide.
table, I move across it.
Row. November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights of a screen reader's capabilities and some of the ways in which the experience can fall short for a blind user. The life of students, faculty, staff, and visitors is largely conducted on the internet nowadays. Screen reading technologies can make many of these interactions work more smoothly. When developers pay attention to certain coding standards, blind persons are able to participate in digital communication, being able to do such things as understand calendars and schedules, enroll in or teach classes, conduct research, and many more essential activities that are conducted electronically. If developers of web pages and applications fail to take into account these design considerations, many people will be left out, unable to use these tools of daily life that are now taken for granted by most of us. The university provides a gateway to many key aspects of social participation. It's imperative that access to university offerings is not jeopardized. For more information, go to digitalaccess.ucsf.edu. Thank you.
So that was just a quick video from, as I said, UCSF, and it was a blind screen reader user going through kind of the examples of inaccessible versus accessible documentation. And the key bit there is the bit that he's mentioned towards the end, is that, you know, we all, I think the video was made in, I think, 2016, so pre-COVID, and he was even saying that the importance of digital accessibility, because of a lot of our a lot of our lives are kind of conducted online, and as we can tell in this, you know, I won't say post-COVID, you know, this new normal, is that nearly everything is conducted online. You couldn't really survive through life with them online. So now you know the kind of what of digital accessibility and the general why of digital accessibility. So to make content accessible for people who need it. I'll move into some specific tips now. And I don't know about you, but I always find it helpful to know why I'm doing something. Like, I was that annoying little child who pestered my parents, like, why, to every single question. There's just whys all the way down. So for each tip, I'm going to approach it with what I'm calling my toddler method. So it's explaining why at every single step. I personally think it's easier for me to remember things that way. So after we've kind of got the general why, is that, you know, for people to access stuff, we also have another big why in the background here, which is the law or regulations governing public bodies or institutions, you know, including the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So what this is these are a set of standards that web content creators or developers use, and that they've created on how to make their information accessible. So obviously, you know, we have to follow the rules and regulations set out by the law, and not to be kind of coming down with the stick about it. But this is kind of one thing that I need to just get out of the way, is the WCAG. So it's Web Content and Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. You'll commonly find it referred to as WCAG. It forms the main book of web accessibility standards. So they outline the concepts behind the standard, the reason why it's important, how to incorporate it, ideas and suggestions, and what counts or doesn't count as a successful implementation of those standards. Now, for most people here, you will not need to know all of them, don't worry. As we mentioned, there's over 50 relevant standards at the moment. You do not need to know all of them, but it is a good reference point. And if you're ever wondering about the reasoning behind any sort of accessibility requirement, then you can go back and have a look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just break down some common kind of accessibility measures that you can do quickly and hopefully easily to show what you can do in your day-to-day life. So let me skip on here now. So as we've seen in the UCSF video, headings really helped the screen reader technology to identify where the important content was and also in what order to read it. So heading 1 comes before heading 2, that kind of thing. Headings also let you style text easily, so you're not manually having to change the font or the size or the color for each heading in your document or presentation. So what I mean by that is that when you're writing a heading in a document, it's often not enough just to make it a bigger font and change the color or bold it manually. Usually in, say, Word or Google Docs or whatever kind of word processing function you're using, there will be a headings or a formatting option. So usually in Word, you'll highlight the text and then click up the top and click heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so forth. It is important that you do use those as they kind of add information in the background of the document, and that allows screen readers to be able to see what they actually are. If it is just visually distinct, then it's maybe not the best for people who don't take in the information visually. Making sure that your document is formatted correctly and you have headings as appropriate. It's also helpful for those who find taking in information more difficult, as they can scan the screen to identify key points or structures. So if you've got a large wall of text, it can be helpful to break it down into subtopics so you can see easily what you're reading. Text formatting doesn't stop at headings though. So take a bullet point list or a numbered list, for example. I know sometimes the tendency is to just start manually typing 1 dot space and then your thing, enter 2 dot space, then your things. And some web or some word processing software will automatically format that for you. So if you see when you type 1 dot and then a space and then your thing, it'll kind of move your text tabbed in a little bit and kind of looks a little bit different. But a lot of the times you'll have to style that yourself. So instead of just typing 1 dot whatever, you can use the button for the numbered list or the bulleted list. So for example, in Word, you can go up to the top, click on the little list, click on the little icon you want for the bullets, and then begin typing. Again, similar visually, but it is much easier and more accessible when you use the built-in function for that. So it doesn't just save you time, you know, instead of typing out 1 dot, 2 dot, and then having to redo the numbers every time you delete something. It does it automatically for you. It also puts a kind of tag in the background, so indicating to AT users that this is a list with X number of items. First item, this, second item of 5, third item of 5. Otherwise, sure, the screen reader could just start talking and you wouldn't know how long the list is, and you may be there for a good little while before you figure out, oh, I actually don't need this list. So do make sure that while it is fun and nice to kind of style things visually, you do also have to make sure that the tech and the background is okay as well. So I'm going to talk about images now. So this is a very busy slide, so let's come back to that in a minute. But images and alternative text are often one of the most popular things that people ask about. I know myself and Jess always get questions about them quite a lot, and it's really an interesting one. So going back to that UCSF video, using alternative text for non-text content is so important. And what I mean by non-text content is images, charts, decorative items, little line dividers, and those kind of things. Not all images, however, are made equal. So some on this slide set, for example, a lot of images or non-text content we use is used for the purpose of visually distinguishing items or adding a little visual flair to the look of a document or a slide. So, for example, while this content is visually pleasing, it doesn't offer any information to the audience. So for a lot of the Gather documentation, you would have seen it had a black background, it had the word Gather and the tagline, but then there would have been also some maybe little pink squiggly lines in the background or something there just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. If I hadn't marked those separately, what a screen reader user would, every time they come across that, it would go pink squiggly line, Gather, pink squiggly line, pink squiggly line. And it just gets very exhausting very quickly. I mean, as a user of text to speech function, it takes a lot of mental energy to listen to it and to go through it. So you really don't need to know that there's 10 squiggly lines in between each paragraph. So for those images, we call them decorative images, and we mark them as decorative. Or we use an empty alt tag. So that is more relevant for kind of developers or people who are working in HTML, but usually on your content or your word processing software, you'll have an option to add alternative text to an image. So that's where you would add that there. If your image conveys something to the audience, however, so for example, if it's an example of something you're talking about, or it shows a certain person relevant to the content, or it has information in it that can be seen visually that's not anywhere else, you should put that in the alt text. So for example, here there's a video, or there's a picture, excuse me, of a braille sheet and two hands on the braille, so hands reading braille, and the alt text for that was hands reading braille. It conveys what the image is to show. So if I was showing an example of alternative methods of reading, I would put that in there. So there's a great kind of decision tree, or a little table created by the same people who published the WCAG guidelines, and it's available online. You might just pop that link in the chat there, someone for me there. And it kind of goes through this content of functional images, images of text, and it separates out these images and kind of how you would deal with them. So I put a little bit on the slide there. So functional images are, for example, an image used as a clickable item. So if you have a little box, a little green box maybe that says, download here, and it's an image, and you click on it and it starts a download, that's a functional image. So the image serves a function. Images of text, ideally avoid images of text. So for example, a screenshot of a website or a screenshot of an article with a lot of text, because otherwise, if that text isn't anywhere else, you've then got to put that text in somewhere where a screen reader user could access it. So either in the text around the image and then mark the image as decorative, or if it's not anywhere else on the screen, if it's not in text anywhere else, you put it into the alternative text. Same for complex images, so graphs, diagrams, that kind of thing. While they are quite useful, they can also sorry, I just had a little message there. Awesome. You'll need to actually convey any information in the alternative text. There's also groups of images. So if you're using a group of images to convey a single piece of information. So if I wanted to put pictures of different types of cake, and it wasn't particularly important about which type of cake was which. I didn't want to say this is a chocolate cake, this is a vanilla cake, this is a strawberry cake. I just wanted to have pictures of cakes. I would group them and then have one alt text for the whole group. So this is something you can do on Word and on PowerPoint. And I will show you that a little bit later. Same for image maps. So this is something that I think Trevor was showing earlier was kind of hotspot area interactions. So those are a little bit more complicated, and I'll defer to the experts on that one to explain that. But I'll show you the link now. So as I mentioned, that decision tree from the WCAG people, I've pasted the first kind of layer of it here. Excuse me. And it kind of guides you through a set of questions that you can do to see, okay, what should I do with this image? What's the correct way to make this image accessible? So for example, first question, does the image contain text? And if you say yes to that, then it leads you into these following options. So yes, and the text is also present as real text nearby. In that case, you'll use an empty alt attribute or mark as decorative. Yes, and the text is only shown for visual effects. You'll also use an empty alt attribute or no, mark as decorative. If the image contains text and the text has a specific function, for example, is an icon, so a search icon or something, you can use the alt attribute to communicate the function of the image. So in your alt text, you'd write search icon, something similar to that. If the text in the image is not present otherwise, then you'd use the alt attribute to include the text of the image. So that's just a little sneak peek at that decision tree. Again, if you want to just, I think that's in the chat there now. I've just noticed I've left out the link to it there on my slide. Apologies, I'll put that in. That's a great kind of way to navigate these questions, and you don't need to know all the WCAG guidelines off by heart. There are a lot of handy tools there to help you. Excuse me. So now what I'll talk about is links, and I promise I'm coming up to the end soon. So links. I've used a still from Disney's 1951 Alice in Wonderland movie here to illustrate my point. So Alice is looking at a bunch of signs pointing every which way, all with confusing words such as, this way, up, yonder, down here. And she doesn't really know where each sign is guiding her to. Is it to the White Rabbit's tea party? Is it to the Queen of Hearts dungeon? Without proper signage, she's pretty lost. And this is similar to the experience of an internet user trying to navigate links, particularly when using a screen reader or any sort of summary tools. It'll give you a list of the links out of context. So a lot of times you'll be presented with a bunch of links that all just say, click here, this page, download. Not very helpful out of context. And even though it may make sense to us to put links in text in a sentence like that, we have to be aware that not all users will be presented with our links in that context. Plus, even people who can visually see the link in the context of the surrounding text, they should know what's going to happen once they click that link. It might be leading to a Rickroll video, or it might be leading to an actual important information page. So putting the web page or document title, the organization or the source in the text of the link, and marking whether the link opens in a new tab or not are great ways to help situate your users. So I have an example there. I've put in the link to watch Disney's 1951 Alice in Wonderland movie on Disney Plus, and I've just put in brackets there, opens in a new tab. This is particularly relevant for screen reader users, as if they click on a link, they don't know whether something has just opened on the screen or whether it's navigated them out of the slideshow, and then they have to navigate back into the slideshow. It's very important. One other thing I will mention are naked links. So that's what we call kind of unformatted links. So you'll see kind of at the bottom of the screen here is www.ahead.ie/AT-Hive. Now, of course, that is a fairly short enough link. I'm able to, vocally say that out loud. However, a lot of links would be, ahead.ie/1234567 and so forth, and they'd be very difficult to parse by a human. So if you try sitting and listening to a screen reader read out a long string of unintelligible numbers every time you post a link in the text, not very fun. So I know for Zoom at the moment, if you don't have the most upgraded version of Zoom, it doesn't allow you to actually format links. So the links we're posting in the chat at the moment, for any screen reader users, I know we have a few out there today, would be getting, please see the link here for the AT Hive, and then www.head.ie/AT Hive. Every time, which is not great fun. So do update your Zoom while I have you and while I'm on my soapbox. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, just looking at my time here, perfect, is my favorite part of content creation, personally, and that is design. So I love a good play around on Canva or Adobe, and especially during the pandemic, kind of, the software Canva became really, really popular and for a lot of social media users. And while I love it and I love a good play around on it, not all of the templates or suggestions are accessible. So inaccessible design can really damage your message and lose your audience. I mean, if we're coming from a kind of marketing or digital marketing perspective, that's obviously not good. But also from a kind of social good and a general life rule, making it inaccessible to people is not fun. So it does take a little bit of work to make your designs accessible. But there are some things to focus on. So for example, fonts. Generally, you'll want a sans serif font, and that is a whole load of gobbledygook. But what it means is that it doesn't have the little lines on the ends of the letters, like say Times New Roman would have, because sometimes that makes it hard to make out the letters. And also having a font where they have quite different letters or characters. So for example, the capital O looks different than the 0. That's always good. Busy layouts as well. If you've got, say, a leaflet or a social media picture that is just too overwhelmed, it just has a lot of things on it, it has a lot of information, a lot of designed elements, that can get really, really difficult for people to figure that out, to find the information they need. Another one which everyone will have heard of probably is color contrast. So you can see I've got an example here on the screen of some sort of advertisement or photo, and on the left, while they are the exact same photo, the text on the left is in a dark color and the text on the right is in a light color. And even visually here, most of you can probably see that the one on the right is a lot better because they've taken into account the differences in the light, and it's kind of ironic, because the quote is, "Even a little light can make a difference in the dark." So there you go. So I'm going to pause here for a minute. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that is absolutely okay. I purposefully did front load this presentation a little bit, so apologies. But we have some tips for you. So at the moment, it has never been easier to make your content accessible or to access content. There are accessibility checkers and reports built into most softwares and programs these days. There's also a lot of clear checklists available for content creators, which I'll go through in a minute. And just to remember that accessibility is a journey. Nothing will ever be 100% accessible for 100% of people. Different access needs will arise, like I said, with regard to color contrast or that kind of thing. However, like the UDL or Universal Design for Learning pyramid, the aim is to make things as universally accessible as possible, while still allowing for those situations where a specific and tailored response is needed. So allowing people to autonomously access your content is a really good step in that direction. So one of the models I'm going to show you here is the POUR model. So POUR. This is what the WCAG guidelines kind of reference a lot as a way to make their content more easily understood. So the basic outline is that your content must be perceivable, i.e., can someone access the information? Is it legible? Operable. So could a person who only uses a keyboard be able to access your content? Or if someone is only using speech control, can they still navigate your content? Understandable. So is your text in plain English? And also, is it predictable? So for example, if you've got a contact section on your website, is that then immediately followed by the actual content information, or is there something else blocking that? So making your content understandable and predictable. And then the last one is robust. This one's more for kind of admins, IT, and developers. Is your content available on multiple platforms, and is it secure? One thing that might be relevant for educational staff in this regard would be to see, is your content available on mobile? So that's the POUR acronym. Then next we have the THRIVES acronym. And again, these slides will all be available. So this is a model by Jen McPartland and Tracy Galvin. It's linked there in my slides. So it's about the author perspective of digital accessibility. So THRIVES, THRIVES. Those TH sounds are hard for me as a Dubliner. The T is for tables. So provide table descriptions and add column and row headers. So that's what we've seen in the UCSF video at the start of the session. The H is for hyperlinks. So use descriptive hyperlinks, informing the user where a link will take them. The R is for recordings. So provide a transcript for video or audio content and add closed captions on any video recordings. I is for inclusive font. So use accessible sans serif fonts optimized for digital display. There are also options for dyslexia specific fonts and other things like that. The V is for visuals. So add alternative text to all images, and for more detailed visuals, provide a description. Again, go back to that decision tree from the W3C website. The E is for examine. We use built-in accessibility checkers to check for issues. So for example, on these slides, I would have used the PowerPoint review tool to see if I had any color contrast issues. And then S, structure, use heading styles, lists, and left justified text to make it easier to read. Quick plug, as I come to the end, I will stop talking in about 20 seconds, I promise. Quick plug for our digital accessibility courses. So they're called the ARC courses, A-R-K, accessibility, resources, and know-how. So we have 3 that are in particular of interest to digital accessibility. One for a digital accessibility introduction for educators. This was specifically made for educators, but it is also applicable to other sectors, such as if you're working in employment or if you're supporting support staff. There's one as digital accessibility, a whole institutional approach. So you can, as a college, kind of approach digital accessibility, or as an organization. And then there's developing a web accessibility statement. I didn't really touch on that today, but that's another aspect of the kind of rules and regulations around accessibility. So I'm finally going to stop talking, I swear. So thank you so much for listening to me. I know it's not always the most fun topic, and you know, I would kind of love to show you some cool technology, but as I said, the kind of accessibility section is the foundation bit for any of these technologies to work. And it is so important. So I'm going to stop there. If you have any questions, feel free. I'll stop talking for a minute, and I know I'm just at time, so we'll get going then soon. Thank you so much. You can email me if I don't get to your questions as well, danielle.o'rourke@ahead.ie. I'll throw that in the chat there. And of course, I will be around for Gather and for the next 2 days. So excuse me while I take a drink.
Thanks so much, Danielle. Might just give it a few seconds in case anyone has any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, or put them in the chat. we'll give it maybe a minute or so, and if not, we'll move on to our next speaker. But that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle. So much information, but it's easy
Yeah.
to not feel overloaded because you kind of broke it down in a accessible way, which was nice.
Hopefully, I know it is a lot of information. You know, there's one question coming in saying whose responsibility are accessibility measures? And I mean, if I had my way, I would say it's everyone's responsibility. You know, if you're putting some content out in the world and you're not showing someone or explaining or making it accessible, you're almost telling them, no, I don't care that you can't access my content. That's a little controversial, my personal opinion, but I believe it's kind of everyone's responsibility, especially if you are in an institution, if you put in institutional measures to support your staff and support your lecturers to make things accessible. That is really, really important. So yeah, I'll leave it there, and I know I'm a little bit over time. So thank you so much, and I think we'll go on to our next speaker.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Danielle. Wonderful presentation, like I said, and we're on, believe it or not, already wrapping up day one.